Welcome to Still Plays Galaxy Heroes. We're back with a small talk video. It's been a couple days. I've played around with the system, sat with the changes, and I figured out my position on this thing. So with this small talk, we're covering my initial thoughts as a free-to-play player, what I think this means for spenders, and how I'm approaching the new currencies and the stores, and one larger impact to the game economy that needs to be highlighted. Now, Reddit is not happy with this one. There's post after post expressing the frustration that a lot of the player base is having on this game update. But for me, there's a lot of annoyances, but so far I don't have a major problem. I think some of that comes down to just having a certain perspective on these changes. And my general thought of this game is that it's not a game. This is a money-making machine, and I'm always looking for ways to exploit it so that I can have fun with it in my own ways. I expect these kinds of things. But I do agree that this is disappointing. When this change was announced, I think most of us thought it was reflective of a piece of new content, which for free-to-play players, it clearly is not. There is in effect almost nothing to do here for free-to-play players, except for the store, which does have some opportunities. But for free-to-play players, this is mostly aesthetic. We now just interact with the existing content differently, except with a new layer of being constantly reminded how much progress we are making in feats that we will not be able to access or participate in. And that is something I truly hope CG changes. The issue of seeing progress on the dailies, that I don't care about. Seeing progress on feats I have access to, that's fine. It's a nitpick. We'll get used to it. But seeing progress like this on episode pass feats, that is completely grating, and I am completely with the community on being annoyed by that. They should turn that off for free-to-play players. But as long as we fully participate, our resource income is mostly unchanged. So for me, this is more of an overhaul to how we get, not what we get. But there is a trade-off. This has placed new pressure on fully participating because there's a larger consequence now to more casual play, which in this period of burnout, that's a risky play for CG, since this does have the risk of breeding disappointment and frustration among the player base, partly because they sold this as new content, and partly because of these constant reminders and feeling like we have to constantly be doing these tiny little things in order to achieve the same results. Now, there has been a lot of good analysis breaking down these resources and how they compare, but I would caution there because it's making the same mistake that was made when calculating the raid changes, where I was the one voice in the community saying it was a positive change. And that miscalculation is treating all the gear or resources as if they are equal and not properly factoring in that we now have the choice to buy exactly what we need and ignore what we don't. That is a meaningful and positive change. It means we will have more resources to invest on the things that will actually improve our rosters, which does equate to faster roster improvement. But I do empathize with the frustration that I'm seeing online. Players are upset that spenders have in effect received new content and resources. I just think that this is a little overstated. In some ways, we can think of this as the same as any pack that spenders would buy. They're just receiving those resources differently. It's being dripped out over days instead of them receiving it all at once. The way that I view this is basically what CG has done is restructure a rather generous shipment pack purchase as content so that spenders can feel like they are making progress by doing work to get their purchases. It's really a mechanism to make spenders feel good about spending, to increase the amount of players who spend. This is not new content, especially with how easy and automatic these feats are, which does make me wonder about the state of the game and the future of the game. Not that I think that there's a problem, but it's a reflective of a larger change in who CG sees as their primary customers. For the longest time, content was made exclusively for Krakens and whales. It was prohibitively expensive for most players, but when a game has enough spenders willing to spend thousands of dollars a month on the game, that's fine. And that was true for a very long time within this game. This change says CG is okay encouraging the middle class pass of the game to spend. The more frugal players who want to spend $100 or less a month and still feel like they are getting value in return. And along with the Conquest Pass, CG has given those players access to more of the game for less in a way that will be a little bit more reliable from their perspective. This is not a paywall to me. If you look at this change from the perspective that this is just a pack with conditions, I think it helps clarify what CG is trying to do here. They're just trying to convert a larger portion of spenders into regular spenders. The frustration is we all thought that this was going to be some new content, and it really isn't. It's just a different way of doing the same things that we were already doing. And that's where I think CG messed up, in making us think that this was content. If they presented this like they did with the Hyperdrive bundle, I think it would have gone over much better, even though people were upset about the Hyperdrive bundle. Or if this was rolled out like the Conquest Pass, where if maybe they gave us a season or an episode of this new system with no pack, and then during the next episode, then release the pass system, so that then players got used to what this change was for what it actually was, which is no change, just a different way of doing the same thing, and then release your monetization for that system. What we have here in part is just a failure to communicate, even though if you read through those posts pretty carefully like I did, they didn't hide anything. I just think they presented it poorly. Now there's a lot of good posts out there that are breaking down the overall value of the resources and how much participation you need to get the points, to get the credits, to do what you need to do in this store. I only think there's a few things worth buying. So I want to break down my general methodology for any new currency. I always try to get them to max first or near max before I start spending them. I will pay attention to how much time is left in the store before it refreshes and make purchases before then. But right now I'm in a hoarding mode. And there's a couple reasons I do that. One, if CG makes any changes to the store, then I can capitalize on those changes immediately. For instance, when Conquest was first introduced, we had a season that did not have character shards. And then when Cat showed up in that second season of Conquest, I was able to get those Cat shards without issue. My brother, who did spend his currency during that first test month, he did not. Now that's probably not going to happen with this store, but the point is CG makes changes to these new systems over time, and I want to have currency on hand to take advantage if it does happen. Now, we also never know exactly what resources we need and when we need it, but by having currency reserved for future use, you can then use that currency on an as-needed basis, pushing for like a timed event. Like if you're short on Jar Jar or short on the return on Balin's Skull, you can then have that currency in reserve to get exactly what you need instead of just spending that stuff in advance hoping you're going to be ready. Because you may end up buying resources that you won't need because we still do get random drops from crates. And I hold out hope that CG is going to add signal data here because we really need that, even if it just happens on occasion, like maybe once every few refreshes. I want to have currency for it. Now for what I'm actually going to purchase, and again I said this near the top, I think that this is largely a positive change because this is not unlike the raid store where now we can buy exactly what we need instead of receiving resources that we may be completely flush in and don't need more of. The choice that this gives us will allow us to focus down on what we actually need. And that first item is going to be Omicrons, and we need to talk about Omicrons because these are critical, especially now that whales are going to have a huge infusion of them. We are going to see a gap grow between whales and free-to-play players that we have not seen before because of this episode pass. Free-to-play players will need to be more careful, more thoughtful about all of our Omicrons, while whales are going to be able to apply them with a whole lot less concern. Because in my Grand Arena brackets, this is what it looks like. My Omicrons, I'm usually first or second in Omicrons in my brackets. I don't expect that to be true anymore. This is going to change because I am not going to be able to keep up with the rate that spenders are going to be able to apply Omicrons. This was something that CG was always careful with Zetas. Omicrons a little bit less so, but Zetas was always something that CG didn't want there to be a way to whale out on them. This is going to create a haves and haves not kind of situation. And that means us free-to-play players, we need to be extremely choosy with which ones we apply, and we need to make sure that we get every single one that we can from where we can get them. Next item we have to be picking up, it's going to be these mod slicing mats, your circuit breakers, your thermal exchange units, your microprocessors. Even these attenuators, these are optional depending just on the rate at which we are receiving this new currency. But the galactic challenges were not the primary, but one of the primary ways we were receiving a good amount of these. We need to make sure that we keep up that income or we're going to start falling behind. So these are must purchases. And the last thing that I'll occasionally purchase, it's going to be mods. But I'm going to be very choosy with mods. I've got plenty of mediocre mods. I've got a full mod inventory of things that I need to be working on. What I do with mods in these stores is I'm looking for ones that are actually going to help me improve my roster. Like this one is something I'll take a chance on. I prefer like all percentage secondaries, but health primary, health mod, that is something that I'll absolutely need because there's a ridiculous amount of characters that need these things. Well, let's say like this blue one here, if this had speed on it, I'd probably be skipping it. At least not until I have a better idea of how quickly we are going to be getting to max in this store with the currency. And these are a little expensive, but the bronzium wiring, and then to a lesser extent the carbonite circuit board, those I would consider purchasing if I need to unload some currency and I'm getting close to the cap. But this is how I'm looking at it. We're going to pick up both Amis. We're going to grab the mod slicing mats that we don't have as much of, the circuit breakers, thermal exchange units, the microprocessors. Occasionally I might grab the attenuators. I'm a little bit more careful on those, so I might not do it. And then the circuit board, bronzium wirings, and then the occasional mod if it fits my needs. And that's going to be about 25k, I think would be the weekly expenditure, or rather 20 to 25k. Here's one impact that needs to get highlighted, either intended or unintended from CG's perspective, but it ties into CG's decision to not increase the number or frequency of assault battles. When you consider the impact of the raid changes and now these GC changes, because in a lot of ways this is effectively a galactic challenge change, what we are seeing is a reduction in the amount of shards we receive. Because yes, we have the option to purchase these shards, but it's pretty expensive and we're not going to really do it in comparison to the other resources. So in effect, we are not getting these. And similarly with the raid changes, like you can technically get a little bit of currency of the shard shop with the original guild currency, but we don't get a lot of that anymore. It's just more incidental and I'm just purchasing these cheap gear pieces now with them. But with the Mark 1 currency, we can't grab shards, or with the Mark 2 currency, I can't grab shards. And we used to be getting a whole lot of Han, Traya, and General Kenobi shards on a regular basis, which was giving us an infusion of shard shop currency. And now we are not getting that raid shard shop or getting the galactic challenge shard shop. And now with that not being offset by any increase in assault battles, we are just getting less and less to be able to spend here, which is taking away from our resources. And it makes it harder and harder to be able to utilize this store or the Datacron store for these purchases. We are getting stretched in these locations, and that's something I think CG does need to address and is a larger problem that is caused by this overhaul to the system. I don't think this was a small talk video. I think this was a talk video. I think I went much longer than I thought I was going to, but overall I'm mostly fine with the changes, but I would like CG to make some adjustments here and be a little bit smarter with how players are going to take this stuff. If they were a little bit more forthcoming on what this was, I think there'd be fewer issues and players would be a little bit more understanding of it. But thank you for watching. Be excellent to each other, everybody. Still plays Galaxy of Heroes.